Well, good morning, church. I don't know if you know this, but some of you guys aren't like you're not around the church a lot. And so when somebody says he is risen, then you reply, he's risen indeed. You know how that works? All right, so Resurrection Sunday, we'll try it out. He's risen. He's risen. All right. All right, we can go home now. We're good. I do want to invite you, if you have a copy of God's Word with you, open it up to 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And I do want to say thank you for joining us today. I know that it's a little bit different. We have different service times, and it was kind of fun watching people walk in at 8:30, and they were like, what's going on? We started at 8, and they're like, no! But that's okay. You're all here, and so good job. Good job, you. Next week, we'll go back to the regular time. My name is Phil. I'm one of the pastors here, and I do want to welcome you. This is a fabulous time for us together to remember the resurrection of Jesus and what that means for us. There is a way in which we can describe the resurrection of Jesus as being an historical fact. But then there's another thing that we can do is we can say, okay, that's a fact, but what is its significance? And so today what I want to focus on is not the historical fact of Jesus' resurrection, but I want to focus on its significance for us. And so that is going to be in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. As you make your way there, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to answer it in your head. If you're one of those folks who likes to answer out loud, that's all right. What is the most challenging thing that you've ever done in your life? What is the most challenging thing you have ever done in your life? It could be a physical thing, an emotional thing. It could be, yeah, man, just call it out. What's all good? Can't hear you, but that's all right. Whatever it is, I almost guarantee you that on the backside of that thing, you were never the same again. It changed you. And so I'm going to ask a second question. Not only what is the most challenging thing you've ever done, but the second question is, how did that challenge impact you? Because I am under the conviction, I almost guarantee this is true, having talked to a lot of people and having my own challenges in life, it's an indisputable fact, I believe, that once you go through hard things, you're never the same again. And there's a kind of principle. If you have done something really, really difficult, the result of having done that really, really challenging, difficult thing is you have more confidence and more strength to do things which are less challenging and less difficult. Does that make sense? So if you've ever run an ultra marathon, which I don't think anyone here has probably done because that's crazy, but if you run an ultra marathon, if somebody challenges you to run one lap, I think you're okay. But if you've never run in your life and somebody says, hey, you want to run a lap? No, you're going to die. Like that's crazy. Because there is, it seems to be a principle that once you've done the hardest thing, everything less difficult, challenging, and it's just easier. On this Resurrection Sunday, let me put this thought in your mind. One of the most impossible things that we can imagine is for a dead person to come back to life. And if God has done the most impossible thing we can imagine, then we can logically conclude this: he must also be able to do less challenging things. In other words, if God has raised the dead, what is there that God cannot do? Now that's a thought. Today what we're going to see as we turn to this text in 2 Corinthians chapter 1 is that Jesus' resurrection is a reason why we can put our hope in God to do things for us and in us which we can't imagine him doing, because we now know that God has accomplished the most challenging thing. Therefore, he can do less challenging thing because we serve a dead-raising God. He is able to raise the dead, and since he is able to raise the dead, he can do anything else. Here's what Paul writes in verse 8. For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will deliver us again. I love this text because Paul is being really, really honest about an experience he's had where he was afflicted. And that affliction was so painful that he describes it as a burden so heavy that he was feeling crushed by it, that he began to entertain thoughts of despair. He began his letter talking to the Corinthian church about affliction, but also about comfort. And now he's informing the church that, you know what? I'm not talking theoretically about pain. I'm talking practically about pain because I know what it's like. And what Paul is doing is building common ground. And there's one thing I know in this room, with as many people as we have here, I know for a fact that not only do we share common humanity, but within our humanity, we all share the experience of affliction. I don't need to convince you that the world we live in is broken. I don't need to convince you that this life that we live is hard, that there are challenges, painful challenges. There's tribulations, there's suffering. That is something that is common to us all. And so when Paul says in verse 8, we do not want you to be unaware, brothers. He says that word brothers, it's a familial word, meaning brothers and sisters, meaning family. He's like, family, I want you to know how hard of an experience we had, namely an affliction in Asia. I want you to know about this. It was hard. And one of the reasons why I love being a Christian, I'm not embarrassed to be one, I'm not embarrassed to be a Bible reader and a Bible believer, is because when I open up the pages of the Bible, I see raw honesty. This life is hard. So hard, in fact, that Jesus himself says this in John 16. I've said these things to you, and he's referring to the things he's been speaking to his disciples about, that in me you may have peace. Jesus wants us to have peace. And then the very next thing he says is, in the world you will have tribulation. It's in the tone of promise. So just think about how weird this is. Hey, I want you guys to have peace. So let me just tell you this. From here on out, your life is going to be incredibly difficult. You're like, wait, what? Bro, seriously? But Jesus is being honest. That word tribulation there is the same original word that can be translated affliction or trouble. In this world, in this life, you will have trouble, you will have affliction, you will have tribulation. But then he says this, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And so what Jesus does is gives us two things. He said, look, this life is hard. This life is filled with affliction. This life is filled with trouble. But two things, peace and courage. They're yours. But if you notice, he says, in me is peace, and I have overcome the world. So if you want peace and courage in the midst of a chaotic, troubling, tribulation-filled, affliction-filled world, it seems as if Jesus is saying, all the peace and all the courage that you would want, you're going to find it in me. Now let's just put a pin in that, and we'll come back to it at the end. But keep that in the back of your mind as we continue on. The thing that I'm noticing in 2 Corinthians is that afflictions that Paul's talking about can come to us by degree. And what I mean by that is there's a variety. In a room this size, and if we all have the common ground of experiencing affliction and trouble, it doesn't mean that we all have the same troubles that last the same amount of time with the same amount of intensity. It probably means that with the amount of people in this room, all having troubles of their own, there's probably a variety of troubles in their weightiness, in their longevity. And I think I see this in the text as we look here in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, just a few verses above where we were, that God comforts us in all our affliction. If you notice, all our affliction, it's kind of a bucket, a group of afflictions without any kind of specific affliction in mind. It's just all of them. Hard ones, easier ones, long ones, short ones. And the whole point of God comforting us in our afflictions is so that we could turn around and we're able to comfort those in any affliction. And that's a beautiful statement, because sometimes in our culture today what happens is we push back on people trying to comfort us, and we tell them, you can't possibly know what it's like to suffer like me because you haven't been through the same exact thing as me. To which we reply, no. Your affliction may be different in intensity and longevity, perhaps, but the same kinds of affliction, the fact that life is filled with trouble I've experienced, and what I've experienced also is God has comforted me. And so when we experience the comfort of God in our afflictions, we can turn to the other afflicted, and we can then offer to them the comfort from God that we ourselves received, so that they can receive the comfort of God and then look at the others who are suffering and then offer comfort to them. So I don't believe it's true that only those who experience the identical kind of suffering can help you in your suffering. I don't think that's true. I think we can help each other no matter what, because God comforts us in all our afflictions. So brothers and sisters, afflictions can vary. In fact, what Paul says later in 2 Corinthians is, he says, this light momentary affliction. Some of us would disagree with Paul when we're going through a particular affliction. Paul, I wouldn't call this affliction light. I think being diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer is not a very light thing, Paul. Thank you very much. Nor do I think it's a momentary thing. It seems like it's very, very final. But that helps us to understand that there's a variety. In fact, what Peter says is, in this you rejoice, talking about the hope we have in Christ through the resurrection, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been grieved by various trials. You see these trials, these afflictions, they come to us, they may last for a little while. They may be light, they may be momentary. But look at what Paul says in the rest of verse 8. We were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. That doesn't seem very light. That doesn't seem very momentary. That seems weighty and intense. In fact, what Paul is saying is his affliction, when he says so utterly burdened, that word there, it's where we get the English word hyperbole, and it means just like kind of excessive. And what Paul is saying is, look, our burdens were like beyond the ability to measure or to explain. They were excessive. It's hard to put into words. I was at the end of my rope. I can't even describe to you how hard it was. In fact, I was burdened beyond my strength. I had no strength within myself to endure the pain and the struggle and the affliction that came my way. I love what Paul writes elsewhere in Romans 12. He says, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation. And that word tribulation is the affliction there. One reason I know for a fact that you and I understand that afflictions are kind of a variety and they come in all shapes and sizes and intensities is because some of you will find that command to be patient in affliction easy. Ooh, I got a massive sunburn. Whew, it's hard to sleep tonight. A couple days, you'll be all right. Others of you have just been diagnosed with MS, and it's going to stay with you a long time. And being patient in that affliction is going to be hard. And because some of us find it easy to be patient in affliction and some of us find it hard, it means to me our afflictions differ in longevity, in the weightiness of it all. In fact, affliction can cause us to feel an unbearable burden and it can lead us to despairing thoughts. That's what happened to Paul. I didn't have what it takes, Paul says. It was beyond my strength, and I began to despair of life itself. I could not imagine how I could continue. And some of us know exactly what he's talking about because someone close to us has died recently, and you feel as though you have no idea how tomorrow is going to happen. Just can't imagine. Some of us have gone through physical ailments where you are thinking to yourself, I cannot endure one more night of this agony. Some of you think, I can't imagine getting out of bed. The mental anguish is overwhelming. You know what it's like to despair. And you know what it's like to think, I'll never heal, I'll never recover. There's no point in doing anything. Nothing's going to change. Paul didn't have the strength within himself to endure. And it makes sense if you think about it. If you believe that you are enough, like the culture tells us, you have what it takes, you deserve everything, whether it's a new style from TJ Maxx or a new vacation, you deserve it. You're amazing. You can do all things, anything. And then all of a sudden you're afflicted in some way, and you face the reality, I don't think I have what it takes. And it's just you. And you've been taught by the world that you need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. You just need to suck it up. Of course you're going to despair. Because if all you have is yourself and you now know you don't have what it takes, there's nothing left but despair. I can't do it. And Paul, knowing that, he then turns our attention outside of ourselves so that we can find what we need when we need it. And we know this because in verse 9 he says, indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. It's as if somebody said, you're going to die, and there's nothing I can do about it. And then he has this 3-letter word which changes everything. Because I know you feel it right now. I can feel it in the room. The air got sucked out. You're just sitting there. Dude, this is not the Easter message I came for. Nah, but it is. All right, 3-letter word, but. And on the back, oh man, I shouldn't say that. But anyways, on the back side of the but, everything changes. Everything changes. Because all Paul was doing was saying, I was once here and I'm at the end of myself. Everything is caving in. Everything is turning dark. Despair is overwhelming me. I'm being crushed by the burdens of this affliction. I've got nothing but. And then things begin to change. Verse 9. But that is the afflictions that burden you to the point of despair, was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God. So what Paul's doing is he's unpacking a purpose for us. He's saying, look, I know you've been afflicted. That's common to us all. It comes in many shapes and sizes, but I want you to understand behind all of the afflictions you experience stands God doing something. And what is he doing? Well, the first thing God is doing is trying to kill your self-reliance. Our world is built upon lying to you to tell you that you have what it takes. And then you live life, and everywhere you turn, you go, but it's evidently not true. It's not true. I'm frequently experiencing things in life that are outside of my control. But we continue to let people lie to us. So what Paul's doing is opening our eyes, saying, look, behind this affliction is God telling you the truth. You don't have what it takes. And your self-reliance is what is killing you. And so he's going to kill your self-reliance. And instead of your self-reliance, he's going to raise up from the dead a new life which is a God reliance. And it's a beautiful way to think about it. Remember, Jesus came and he died, but then he rose again. You and your rebellion and sin, God is killing in order to raise you up again. He's going to kill your self-reliance in order to raise you to God reliance. He's going to kill your despair in order to give you hope. And that's exactly what Paul says to us. Your afflictions are there to make you rely not on yourself any longer, but to rely on God. Now, what is it that incentivizes? And so what I mean by this is, like, if you're here today and you're not a Christian, you're probably asking, like, why should I do that? Like, why should I trust God? And here's probably the best reason I can imagine. You should trust God that he can provide for you the strength you need to endure the hardships and to get through life with joy and hope, because we're not just saying put your trust in God, any old God. There's a God specifically we're referring to. Who is it? It is the God who raises the dead. And if God can raise the dead, the most challenging, most impossible thing we can imagine, if he can do the hard thing, can't he do the lesser things? If God can raise the dead, can't he heal you? If God can raise the dead, can't he supply you with the strength to endure the suffering that you're enduring? Yes. The very fact that Jesus was laid into a tomb 3 days later to walk out of it is evidence that God does the impossible. And therefore, stop relying on yourself. You can't do much. Instead, rely on him who shows you he can do anything. And so what God is doing is killing the self-reliance in order to raise up God-reliance, that you may have hope. You see, Paul says, knowing that God who raised Jesus from the dead will also raise us with Jesus and bring us into his presence, there's an impact there. It is all for your sake. God's doing this for you, so that as grace extends to more and more people, it may increase thanksgiving to the glory of God. What he's saying in verse 15 is, look, God killing you in your self-reliance is grace. That's a gift. Because at the end of the long road of self-reliance is nothing but despair. But instead, God gives you a different pathway. The road of God dependence and reliance, the end of which is nothing but joy. And so what he's saying is, once you recognize it's a gift of God to slay your self-reliance, and it's a gift of God to give you the endless joy he's promised, when you're sitting in your hospital bed and your loved ones and friends are surrounding you, beep, 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 and everyone has tears in their eyes, filled with sadness, and yet on your face is a smile and from your lips is a song, people will look at you like, what is wrong with you? How can you lay there and yet sing? How can you have joy in a moment like this? And they will ask you, what's the source of this? God has given me the comfort and the hope that though this body give way, I'm getting a new one. Oh, praise the name. And what happens is the people will see the grace of God alive in you with the smiling face and the song on your lips, and they too will give thanksgiving to God, saying only God can intervene in a moment like this and give joy. To God be the glory. And this is what Paul says, we don't lose heart. So the conclusion is we don't lose heart. We don't become overwhelmed. We don't become burdened to despair anymore, because we know, verse 14, Jesus was raised from the dead and we're going to be raised too. So even though the outer self is wasting away, look, man, I don't have to convince any of you, except for you young people. You young people think you're going to last forever. And you think you're going to be pretty and buff forever. It's not true. Look at the people around you. Half of us are half dead already. We got that saggy, loose skin. Bones don't work like they used to. They make noises. We're like, wait, what? Where'd that come from? You're like, oh. Your outer self is wasting away. One day you're going to need corrective lenses. One day you're going to need hearing aids. Some of you pretend you need them just because you want to listen to your wife. But anyways, the outer self is wasting away. But here's the reality. The inner self, the new life that God is raising from the dead, the self-reliant person is being renewed day by day. So God is killing the self-reliant outer self in order to raise the inner self to the point where one day we will receive a new outer self, a new body. And I love what Paul says here is like this was to make us. Verse 9, this was to make us. So my question is, who's the maker? Who's the one standing behind all this, making this happen? God is. That is to say, God inflicts us with afflictions. God is doing it. Now, I want to point out something really, really important to you, and it all hinges on prepositions. That's why grammar matters. If you believe your afflictions is God's doing, and He's doing it to you, you will feel bitter and angry at Him. But if you have afflictions and you know God is doing it, but you know that He's doing it for you, everything changes. God is not inflicting you with afflictions just because He gets a laugh out of it or it's entertaining to Him. He does it purposefully for you so that you would grow in God reliance. And in growing in God reliance, you will have hope. And that hope will one day give way to seeing God as He is and being filled with inexpressible and glorious joy. He's doing this for you, for your good and for His glory. As Paul says, this light and momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. That cancer diagnosis, that physical malady, that emotional turmoil, that mental anguish, in light of eternity, it is momentary. And as burdensome and weighty as the affliction feels, there's a greater weight of glory that awaits us. One day, every knee will bow, tongue confess, Jesus is Lord. And as a result, every eye that sheds a tear, the tears will be wiped away. Pain will be no more, sorrow will be no more, death will be no more. And we will enter into that glorious state, and we will be utterly satisfied. Paul knew this. That's why he says in verse 10, God delivered us from such a deadly peril. He delivered us from this affliction. He will deliver us. He's saying, I know that God did it already. He delivered us. And what's amazing is Paul doesn't mean delivered like He never has troubles again. What he means is He's delivered us through it. That's the kind of connotation of it. Like God has supported me, strengthened me. He has provided for me everything that I need to get through the affliction. And so he's confident God will deliver us. I'm confident God has proven Himself faithful. He'll do it again. And so he says, on Him we have set our hope. On Him we've set our hope. And with confidence, he says that God will deliver us again. How can Paul be so confident? How can he be so assured? He puts his hope on God. What is God like? God is the one who gives life to the dead. Can Google do that? Can your Instagram followers do that for you? Can clean eating? Can your fitness regimen? Big biceps, long eyelashes? Nope. In fact, God is not only the one who gives life to the dead, but he is the one who calls into existence things that do not exist. We try to do this all the time. We try to dream up, and what do they call it today? Manifest. Oh, I'm trying to manifest bounty. Okay. How's that working so far? Be honest. I'm manifesting filet mignon. Well, all I got is Taco Bell. Dang. How's that going for you? God is the one who says to dead people, arise, and they pop up. God is the one who speaks into existence the very universe, and there it is. Why would you put your hope in anything else? All right, let's go back to John 16. Jesus telling the disciples some things. In me, you have peace. In me, you have peace. In this world, chaos, tribulation, suffering, affliction. But take heart. Be of great courage. I have overcome the world. So here's the question. How has Jesus overcome the world? Well, the world and everything set up against God did its very best to keep God from doing what it is he intended to do, namely, to save a people for himself. So the whole world was set against Jesus, opposing him every way. And they thought they had succeeded when they finally nailed him naked to a cross. Finally, rid of this guy. Then they put him in a tomb, rolled a stone over it, and put a guard out in front, just to make sure. Jesus not only defied the stone by having it roll away, he folded up his grave clothes, put them in a nice little pile. It's very, conscientious. And he rose from the dead and came out that tomb. And the whole world, who thought that they had finally ended his disruptive ways, were shocked that nothing can hold them back. Not even death. And they're like, what else we got? Like literally, what else do you have? If somebody is all up in your business, you want to get rid of them, what is the best way to get rid of them is kill them. There's nothing left to do. And they did that to Jesus, but he won't stay dead. He came back to life. So what happened is Jesus said, look, take heart. I've overcome the world. Jesus, how have you overcome the world? Well, I was dead. I'm not anymore. I've overcome the world. So you can be of good courage and of great peace, because in me, nothing can stop me. And if you believe in me, nothing can stop you. Though you die, yet you shall live, Jesus promises. So what God has done is he's proven himself reliable and trustworthy because he has raised Jesus from the dead. He has delivered us from the most deadly peril imaginable, namely the wrath of God. And he has promised to raise us up on the last day. What we see is Jesus promising this, brothers and sisters. It is astounding. This is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life. That is to say, I will raise you up on the last day. As I have risen, you shall rise too. Your body may give way, but that's only opening the door to glory. I will raise you up on the last day, and nothing will stop me. I love this little story. We'll end with this. You probably know these two characters, Mary and Martha. They had a brother named Lazarus, and Lazarus dies, and some people send news to Jesus. He's hanging out with his disciples, and they get news. Hey, Lazarus, the one you love is dead. And Jesus goes, all right, thanks for letting me know. And he just stays there an extra day or so. And what's weird about the text is it actually says because Jesus loved Lazarus, he didn't go right away. He stayed there. And finally he shows up A little bit later, Lazarus has been dead 4 days. The women, Mary and Martha, who's Lazarus' sisters, come up to Jesus, and they both say to him, "Teacher, if you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. Like, you could have done something, but you weren't here." And so this happened. And they're kind of like subtly like throwing shade on Jesus. Like, "Man, you could have done something. You weren't here. You should have been here, bro. You could have done something." And so Jesus simply replies, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? Because Jesus tells the ladies, "Look, I didn't come on purpose so you could see the glory of God. You think that the worst affliction this past week has been hard for you. Your brother has died. Painful. You've been weeping and wailing and mourning. You've been filled with sorrow. I let you experience all of that so that when I did come, I'll show you my glory." So what does Jesus do? He says, "Lazarus, come forth." And what happens? This dude who's been dead for 4 days comes out. And it's almost like Jesus is like, "This is what I've been trying to tell you. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the God who raises the dead. I am the one who calls into existence things that don't exist. I am God in human flesh. I came for you. Do you believe this?" And I imagine the ones who did were like, "I ain't never seen anything like this." God raises the dead. Paul's entire mindset has been flipped inside out. At one point, he put his hope in the unstable world and himself. And now, because Jesus has come and has died and rose again, so too Paul is dying and rising again. He's dying to a self-reliance and rising to a God-reliance. And because of that, he has replanted his hope squarely and entirely on God. Why? Because our God is the dead-raising God. That's why. Let me ask you this question. Do you believe this? Yes. If you believe this, God will raise you up on the last day. So, Father, I pray for this. Oh, God, I pray that you would help those who are here who may not yet believe, to believe. God, if they're being honest with themselves, they understand that self-reliance has gotten them not very far, at least not as far as they were promised. And yet, God, you have promised us not just to endure and to be able to have joy and hope in the midst of suffering and troubles, but you have promised us that there is a world all to our own beyond this world, that even though we die, yet we shall live. As Jesus died in a fleshly human body, he was raised to new and glorious life, and so too we will die, but we will be raised to new and glorious life if we look upon the Son of God and believe. So I pray, Lord, that you would cause faith and that people would put their faith in you. You are trustworthy. You've proven it because the tomb stands empty. You are the God who raises the dead. And for those of us who believe this already, God, may we be reminded that you have promised us, in this world we will have tribulation, but there is courage that we can take and peace we can have because Jesus has not only crawled into a tomb, but he walked back out. So thank you for this victorious resurrection glory and the hope we have from it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.